Hello, everybody.
We need to do this more often, Devin.
You'll have to speak up.
I'm Malka Kopel, and I'm from the Collaboration and Consensus Program at Sac State, and I will be your facilitator this afternoon. Welcome to the GSP preparation workshop for the Madera Subbasin. It's nice to see a large crowd here. There are agendas for those of you who need a copy at the table up front. There are also sign-in sheets. I ask you to please sign in if you haven't already. You can do that over the course of the meeting. Today's meeting has two goals. One is we're going to review this meeting and its in the Sigma context and take a look at the timeline. And then the bulk of the meeting will be reserved for presentations from the GSAs. GSA-specific presentations on conditions, needs, and potential projects. There will be an opportunity for questions and answers during the presentations, and there will also be an agenda item solely devoted to public comment. This meeting is scheduled to end at 4:30, but if there is additional public comment, presenters have agreed to stay. Any questions? Okay. We have a very big room, but I would like to do introductions. So if everyone can just say your name and your affiliation, we can meet each other. Brian?
Brian Thorson, Davis Engineering, GSP Development Team.
Andrea Sandoval, ID.
Greg Young, Tully & Young, consultant to the county.
Nick Watterson with Blue Orphan Scout 80, also part of the technical.
Rod Parrish, farmer. Jeff, Ed and Hubel Milk Producers Council.
Bob Abrams, Ecologic Incorporated.
Glenn Allen, Fresno County. Taylor Allen, grower. Trevor Nelson, farmer.
Eddie Marnazzi, farmer.
Leslie Martinez, Leadership Council for
Michael Moore, President of Madera Farm Trade.
Michael Knight, farmer.
Nope.
Maria Mejia, Self-Help Enterprises.
Kyle Mueller, grower.
There's a chair up in front.
Cindy Silva, Roller.
Derek Robinson, City Madera Council.
Brad Samuelson, Water and Land Solutions.
Bruce G, grower.
Todd Lewis, grower.
Michelle Stevens, local realtor.
Mike Delgara, grower. Roger Skinner, Houston Water District. Fort Kaufman, Eastern Water District.
Joe Vivid, interested.
Jim Mooney, grower.
John Campbell, farmer. Al Sheeter, grower.
Kirk Seguski, appraiser.
Tom Willie, T&D Willie Farms.
Al Solis, planning consultant. Jerry Kaczynski, I'm a retired hydrogeologist. I'm on the county committee.
Christina Beckstead, Madera County Farm Bureau.
Stuart Wild, grower. David Bridge, grower.
Ian Guerrero, grower.
Tom Walsh, resident.
Bev Walsh, residential water user.
Taylor Frederick, Madera NRCS.
Dina Nolan, Madera Irrigation District.
Carl Jansen, Madera Irrigation District Director.
Stephanie and Agneson, County of Madera.
Tommy Gracie, Madera Irrigation District.
Diane Kirk, grower in Gravelly Ford Irrigation District.
Dave LaQuarcie, grower.
Kim Witten, County of Madera.
Stay front table.
Devin Avilas, Agro Cooperative, grower.
Jay Twig, Madera County Advisory Committee.
Mark Hudson, Tranquility Water District.
Deborah Ritz, grower.
Dave Merchant, City of Madera staff.
Joe Hopkins, Provo and Pritchard Engineering for Madera Water District.
Ken Bonesa with Quadnoff, representing Gravelly Ford Water District.
Brian Ehlers with Provo and Pritchard, here on behalf of Root Creek Water District.
Phil Pierre, grower.
Michael Hoover, grower.
Anyone I missed?
Me. Donald Holly, City Councilman for the City of Madera.
Nick Bruno, Root Creek Water District.
Julia Berry, Root Creek Water District.
Chairs available? There's a couple of chairs now here. Thank you. Yes. Ready? Introduce yourselves and
I'm Stephanie Magnuson. I work for the County of Madera. I'm going to be doing part of the introduction along with Greg Young, our consultants for the county, as well as Tommy Gracie from MID. We would like to thank the Senior Center for hosting us here. The room is very full, but we never know how many people are going to turn out. So thank you for coming. And thank you to the Farm Bureau who owns this enormous stream, which assembles from like this size, so kind of a feat of nature. Okay, so our meeting objectives today, we're going to do a very short review of the Sigma requirements. Feedback from previous sessions that we've had was too much review, so this is a short review for people who are new. We're going to look at the overdraft estimate for the sub-basin, and then this is a new element. This time, representatives from each JSA are going to stand up and talk to their specific conditions, solutions, and what landowners can expect. So we've shaped this around your feedback from the last workshop in June. So hopefully it meets your needs. So we have 7 GSAs in the Madera sub-basin. Thank you for moving the legend over so I didn't have to do it from by heart. So City of Madera is in the center. Root Creek. The colors are really weird, right? New Stone. Madera Water District. I'm doing well so far, right?
Yeah.
I'm like 4 for 4. Okay, county is green. And then this is MID. So the reason we're going over this is it really depends where you grow. We understand people grow in multiple GSAs. So it's important for you to keep in mind where exactly you are growing. Where did Greg go? Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
This is mine.
Stephanie, can we kill some of the lights?
We could
Yeah.
turn them off anyway.
There's switches over there.
Probably don't. Shut the lights.
Hang out over here.
Might be enough if we just turn them all off. I need this bank off. If we hear snoring, we're gonna throw something at you to wake you up. Just really quickly, we want to go through some of the Sigma stuff. Sigma, again, is the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act that was passed in 2014 by the state and applies to basins throughout California. We are one of those sub-basins. By requirement of our sub-basin and the designation we have, there needs to be a groundwater sustainability plan or plans covering the entire sub-basin submitted to DWR, that's the Department of Water Resources, and the State Water Resources Control Board by January 30th, 2020. Right now, there are 5 GSAs that are working on 1 GSP. Again, remember there were 7 in that map. 5 of them are working on 1. Gravelly Ford may split and do its own. Root Creek and New Stone are each preparing their own GSP. These all have to tie together. all the GSAs, and GSA stands for Groundwater Sustainability Agency. Anybody, if there's any time where acronyms are funky, just raise your hand and we can explain what they mean, but trying to keep words short on this presentation. A GSA is a Groundwater Sustainability Agency. It actually has authorities under the regulation and the state law as to what it can do. Most of them are tied to the jurisdictions like of a water district. They're within the same boundary of that water district. So there are 5 competing one GSP, 2 are each doing their own GSP. All of them must agree with each other's demands and assumptions and execute a binding coordination agreement per the water code. That coordination agreement also has to be turned in and submitted with your GSP and approved by the Department of Water Resources and the State Water Board. In Sigma, it says sustainable groundwater management must be occurring by 2040 for the entire subbasin. We're in 2018, this plan is due in 2020, so essentially that's giving us a 20-year period to get to sustainability. So between now and 2013 or 2039, we're going to focus on implementation with undesirable results, which I'll get to in a minute, likely to continue. So that means we're trying to transition to a period that once we get to 2040 and beyond, we must be sustainable with no undesirable results. What does that mean? Sustainable groundwater management means the management and use of groundwater in a manner that can be maintained without causing undesirable results. We see a lot of circular language here. I get it. That's the way statutory language works. But undesirable results mean the following: chronic lowering of groundwater levels. And as will be discussed later, Tommy's going to go over some things on this. We're going to be involved in defining that. It's not that somebody comes in from the state board and says, this is your definition. We have the opportunity to define it ourselves. So chronic lowering of groundwater is an undesirable result. So is significant and unreasonable reduction of groundwater storage. So is significant and unreasonable seawater intrusion. That's not an issue as much for us, but remember this applies everywhere in the state. Well, hopefully it's not an issue at all for us. If it is, we got some other issues going on. Significant and unreasonable degraded water quality. Significant and unreasonable land subsidence. There definitely are portions of this basin, this subbasin, and when we get into Chowchilla subbasin, that have subsidence issues. And depletion of interconnected surface waters. This is where groundwater and surface water are basically contributing to each other in a saturated zone. Maybe a lot of times there's environmental configurations with that. So essentially, we have to have a plan that addresses these 6 undesirable results and says we don't want these to be occurring. After 2040, we don't want these to be occurring. Some of them may still occur as we transition to that point. I'm going to hand it over now. That's our Sigma overview, so we're trying to keep that short and sweet. Now we're going to go into the subbasin, talk about some of the specifics for the subbasin, and then go into GSA specific discussions. So I'm going to hand it over to Tommy with the MID.
Thank you, Greg, and I'm also going to go fairly fast on this. This is all information you've seen before at our prior meetings, but it's important for those of you who weren't present, or as a reminder, to provide an overview of the basin before we get into the specific GSA information. So to start with, same map you saw earlier from Stephanie, including Gravelly Ford, we're not going to forget them. We've got about 348,000 acres of land contained within the subbasin. That's a lot of land. It's a fairly sizable subbasin. Of that, 216,000 of irrigated agriculture. So big chunk of that is irrigated agriculture with demands. So digging into that a little further, obviously irrigated ag dominates our area. We're an ag-based economy. Our city, most of our industry is based on agriculture. No surprise, and we have lots of irrigated agriculture. If we looked at this information from that map, you can see from 1989 to 2015, we have seen expansion of agriculture and land being put into development from 213,000 acres to over 216,000 acres. The biggest change that had an impact on water usage is the shift in crop types. We've gone to more intensive water use crops. That raised our demands, and so we saw impacts of additional water being used from our aquifer. That caused the average, we call it ETAW, basically the consumptive use of the plants, so the irrigated agriculture increased from an average of approximately 1.75 to 2.13 from 1989 to 2015. So you see there's an increase in our overall usage by the crops we're growing. Our urban use is in relation to the crop demands is fairly small. In the city of Madera, it uses approximately 4,500 acre-feet a year in consumptive use. That's water that's consumed by the city, not making its way to the treatment plant and then put back into the recharge basins at that location. Rural residential, about 18,200 acre-feet per year, sub-basin wide. So where do we get our water to meet these demands that we talk about? Well, one, we have surface water. Obviously MID, a big part of what we do is manage our surface water supplies in our sub-basin and for our area of the district. And we bring those in. Also, Gravelly Ford has contracts similar to MID. They're able to receive water from San Joaquin River and others. There are other GSAs with certain rights, Madera Water District and Root Creek. There are periodic diversions of flood flows and portions that routinely seep and percolate of that surface water to the groundwater aquifer. In the groundwater subbasin, obviously native groundwater from percolating rainfall and stormwater seepage. So as we receive storms, that goes into the ground. The natural channels throughout our subbasin percolate water, so that adds to our aquifer. And then of course the seeped and percolated surface water from recharge efforts, our canals that seep water into the aquifer. So those are the inputs. If we look at this on a chart, as far as our demands, groundwater extraction on the left and groundwater supply on the right. If you look at all of our demands and sum them up, with the information we have, we estimate that as a range from 433,000 to 650,000. It's a fairly big range, but there's a lot of assumptions that go into these calculations. So if you average that, you're looking at about 541,000 acre-feet of water a year consumed. So to put that in kind of a volumetric book, it's close to the size of Millerton Lake every year that on average that we consume. Looking at our groundwater supplies, there's various things that make that up, from deep percolation of the applied water as we irrigate crops. The crops themselves don't take up all of that water. Some of that makes it back into the aquifer. That's the bottom bar here. You add the rivers and streams, precipitation or rainfall that occurs, groundwater inflows, and our imported surface water. You see that we have on supply side about 380,000 acre-feet. So there's a pretty big gap there. Simplifying that even further, you can see that the estimated overdraft for the subbasin as a whole is about 161,000 acre-feet of water. It's a pretty big chunk of water, and that really defines the problem that we have to fix. So on average, we need to figure out a way to make up 161,000 acre-feet. It's a big task at hand. So we need to do this ourselves. We need to work with all of the agencies together to figure out solutions to this, to avoid the State Water Resources Control Board coming in and taking a who knows what approach to solving this issue. They've given us time to do that. The good news is we, as agencies and as the growers and residents and cities and other agencies, get to define what undesirable results are. We've talked about those earlier and at our prior meetings. We get to look at our groundwater elevations as a proxy to measure the results of that, and we get to set the objectives across the basin. And so that's what we're working on, we'll be working on and are starting to work on today. We get to define the opportunities to augment our supply, so how do we bring more surface water in? We all know water projects are difficult, and they take time to do, but this is the side that we want to start with. How do we optimize the imports, bringing water in, getting more water into the ground? How do we enhance the existing supplies that we have available to us in our subbasin and in our individual agencies? The part that nobody likes to talk about, but is the reality, is, the good news we get to define is how do we reduce consumption? With that much water to make up on an average annual basis, the reality is we're going to have to look at reductions in our consumption side. It's just the reality. So how do we do that? Well, the good news is we get to determine that. And that's a hard problem to solve, but we're here and we're working on it. And Stephanie's got a couple more slides here, and then we're going to get into the details of each individual GSAs.
Okay, thank you, Tommy. And so part of our message here today is that while we are in this together, we have a lot of different conditions among the GSAs. For example, the costs and the benefits of projects may be drastically different by GSA. There's nothing that's really uniform across the subbasin, which is why we're speaking to you individually today. And we can evaluate a combination of projects and management, looking at costs, feasibility analysis, and fairness or equity. So what we're gonna do is we're using native groundwater as a starting point for sustainable yield. We had a lot of questions in June and before about what sustainable yield was. And the truth is, we can't tell you because it's the end of the process. It's after you've defined undesirable results. But we're gonna start with the native groundwater as that number so that you have a number, which I think is better than no number for a year. So the native groundwater is basically infiltration from precipitation combined with the seepage from rivers and streams. And we're rounders, some of us here, so we're coming up with about 0.5 acre feet per acre. And we're putting that out there for the purpose of exploring solutions. All 7 GSAs share in the availability of the native groundwater. And each GSA may have other supplies that bump up, sometimes very significantly, what contributes to sustainable yield. Okay, that was all of our background. In totality, we're going to go into 6 individual presentations now.
Let me just pause for a second and see if there are any questions so far. All right, here we go. So the Madera County GSA has a total of 178,000 acres. About half of it is irrigated. This is a lot less than the other GSAs you're going to see in terms of percents. And this is a pretty, it's a pretty strong cause for concern for me because it means that there's a lot of what we can call latent demand, meaning there's demand that's out there. It could be expressed at any time because right now anyone can put in a well with a permit, and it could make the problem significantly worse by adding to the overall demand. In terms of Madera County, 95% of the county GSA in the Madera subbasin, the ETAW, the evapotranspiration for applied water, is from irrigated agriculture. We're looking at about 190,000 acre feet for irrigated ag and about 12,000 acre feet for rural residential. So you can see the ag to residential ratio right there. People were asking about that in previous meetings too. The average consumptive use is about 2.24 acre feet within the county GSA. That's also higher than it is within the other GSAs and higher than it is within the average for the whole subbasin. So here's what this looks like in terms of a graph, and you can see the current shortfall per year is 111,500 acre feet per year. That's a really big number. For those of us who work in water, it may feel even bigger. It's a huge number of overdraft.
We might kick it over.
So what's being planned by the county GSA? So we've solicited ideas from the county advisory committee for the Madera subbasin, and I've organized them. We've also talked in our technical ad hoc group about what ideas people have, so I'm going to review those right now. So as Tommy alluded to, we always are looking for supplies first, right? This is a supply augmentation first. So the county does have a very small CVP contract. Some of that water, if it's not used for the development, Hidden Lake Estates can be transferred somewhere within the basin or the Chowchilla subbasin. We do have the ability to access flood flows for recharge at times, and we can talk more about the specifics of that. and we have the ability to purchase water from others. But I think one key point is that these conversations are happening all around the Central Valley right now, and we all know what high demand does to the cost of supplies. So we're gonna see the cost of supplies go quite high. And there is a point at which it's not going to be a supply you wish to purchase. It will be too high. So just keep that in mind, please. So we've also talked about building recharge projects, both on farm, meaning individual farmers are doing recharge and some kind of credit. We visited Pajaro Groundwater Management Agency to look at their recharge crediting program. We have looked at what the cost might be for a giant facility where we're doing recharge, and we're still sharpening our pencils on those costs, but they are very high. This might be something similar to United Water Conservation District in Ventura. They do entirely recharge for ag in Fillmore and Santa Paula, where they grow kind of high value berries. So we have something to use as a model, but the costs are pretty high. We've heard from folks locally some interest in dry wells and injection wells, so they are on the list. There are also options to partner with others and build capacity behind Buchanan Dam and expand canal capacity. These are projects that are not quick and easy, but they would allow us to bring in more water in times of flood flows. There was a question in the back.
I'm not familiar with Buchanan Dam. Where is that? Buchanan Dam?
Not in the sub-basin, but it helps with the problem. Another piece at the bottom that we've heard fairly frequently is that folks who are in the county white spaces like Madera, Ranchos, those folks have some concerns about domestic wells going dry amid agriculture. So one solution for them might be expanding existing residential distribution systems and getting them hooked up to a more reliable supply. So those are the things that we have heard from people. We did project solicitation sheets, we took emails, we talked to people informally. This is kind of a condensed list of supply side, projects. That was not good. There it is though. And then in terms of demand management, which is the less pleasant option, we've talked with folks about what conservation easements might look like. What about groundwater allocations? What would happen if you could trade your allocation on some sort of water market? To be clear, it's not trading your right, it's trading an allocation. We've priced out what we might need to do in terms of charging extraction fees. Lots of water agencies, including Pajaro Groundwater Management, including United Water Conservation District, they are charging growers something between $200 and $400 per acre foot that's pumped out to fund the sorts of programs that are on the left side. These fees are fairly comparable to what other water districts are currently charging in one way or another, but they haven't been charged. I don't think I'm gonna get that, just in case. They haven't been charged by folks in the county white space areas because there hasn't really been a water district in these areas. While we shift towards demand management in one fashion or another, we will still use groundwater, and sometimes this is called mining the groundwater. But this is the way to transition the economy, is to very slowly stair-step our way downward. And the last item, establish funds to potentially mitigate dry wells. This one and this one, they're kind of two ways of getting at the same problem. Because obviously one concern we have is that more wells, particularly residential wells, are going to go dry as we continue to shift the economy towards crops that use less water and towards less water use in general. So we need to do something for these folks. So what does this look like in detail? We're currently modeling recharge projects with an average of 10,000 to 15,000 acre feet per year. I will say people think that number's low, but we're obviously not gonna get that every year. That's probably every 5 years, so it might be 50,000 every 5 years. And again, these are gonna end up being expensive, and they're gonna end up being competitive, and that we're competing with other folks for the same source of supply and for the rights to use that water. Here's what the reduction kind of looks like in graphic form. So you can see that over the implementation of SGMA, let's try from 2015 to 2040, you can see the ETAW going down fairly steeply, but then we're at a level of sustainability where we stay for 50 years, which I think the combination of that probably exceeds the lifespan of all of us in the room right now, so. The continued use of stored groundwater is of importance to note because we are doing this slowly and over time. What this means that we will essentially mine 90,000 acre feet per year. And that means groundwater wells are going to continue to go down as the consumptive use reduction is implemented. So in terms of the specifics, which is what people were asking for, it's possible that by 2040, we may be in the county GSA at 0.5 acre feet per acre. We know that is a very low number. We are looking at ways to transition the economy. We're looking for different crops. We're looking for trading and more water markets. In fact, if you're interested in water markets and would like to meet at the Farm Bureau, 9 o'clock tomorrow, we're having a meeting to discuss how water markets might be implemented. Anyone's welcome. It's intended for county GSA. And our continued use of the existing stored groundwater will help us in this transition, but it will lower the groundwater levels in many areas. So what does this mean as a landowner in the county GSA? We'll develop recharge projects. We'll evaluate and see what's economically feasible. We will need to transition to lower total consumptive use through some version of allocations, incentives, or charges. Their groundwater level within the county GSA and elsewhere may continue to go down, and there will be increased groundwater regulations and reporting in some fashion, and the water market is there as well. I think that might be the end of my good news. Madera Irrigation District was going to go next. Malka, do you want us to pause for questions?
If there are questions, yeah. Go ahead.
So what do you see the sustainable level of groundwater being in the White area? Is it around, 300 feet right now, somewhere like that?
Oh, what actually is the water level?
That you see is, where do you see us getting to before you see us sustained?
I would defer to a groundwater hydrologist, but kind of bottom line is the groundwater levels are different throughout the subbasin and the county-wide areas.
Well, yeah, I think that gets to the question about it. It just depends on how you end up defining undesirable results, and so those are and the minimum thresholds that go with those.
Well, they tell us, I'm in the ranchos, they tell us 500 feet is as far as we want to go because then it gets contaminated with arsenic.
Who's they?
All of the meetings I've gone to for 5 years.
Well drillers, everybody.
Yeah.
That's just kind of your typical, that's where you hit bottom. You don't go lower than that.
Right.
Typically in the ranchos.
And like I said, our neighbors are putting in new wells at around 300-foot level, so I'm just kind of wondering how far you're gonna let it drop before you say we're not gonna go below this point.
Well, I don't have a number for you right now. That would be something we could model. I would also add a plug for connecting to a distribution system.
Well, it doesn't matter because I live next to the system well, and it's at 500 feet, so they went to 500 feet and stopped.
But in water distribution systems, they have the ability to distribute costs and to treat and to blend water. So there are bigger solutions when you're connected with others.
Are
We're
you
never
talking
gonna
about
get
a community well, like amongst residents? Is that what you're referring to?
No, I'm referring to one of the county water systems, but you could connect to any, I mean, you could build a
Your
system.
county isn't connecting any properties.
They're too far
There are
apart.
property owners in north of 12 and some that are on MD10, I think.
Right.
But that have paid the assessment years ago, but the county's not connecting anybody else, from my understanding.
Well, they'll connect them if they pay for it, but it's exorbitantly expensive for an individual homeowner to connect. And then they gotta be the guy right next to the current line to even be able to afford it.
So let me give you an answer, and then I'd be glad to talk to you afterwards a little bit more about it, because I know it's important. So I think the county position on this may have changed because we may be able to fund it through a project within the GSA. However, people are looking into it, that's not a promise. And I'm kind of putting this out there that people have to want to be in a distribution system, right? In order for us to offer that. And if all we hear is, I don't want to be in it, it's too expensive, your wells aren't deep enough, we're probably not going to end up pursuing it. But the county position in general right now seems open to the idea of expanding existing distribution systems to help folks over the next 20 years with Sigma.
Right, and I agree, but I know there's people that are well beyond MD10A that we're never gonna get to. You couldn't afford to. You could never afford to get to all the lots that are out in the ranches. And that's what's just what I'm saying, so there's some people that are always gonna be on wells out there on residential property.
Right.
And, you know, if they can only go 500 feet or so, I just wanna know what that number is, so that I know if my kids should buy homes out there or go elsewhere.
We can't tell you what that number is right now because it hasn't been
We'll
modeled.
keep working towards it.
We will. I understand you need to know.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just for clarity, the half acre foot is, includes the lands that are currently not irrigated?
Yes. Okay, because there are a number of other presentations, I'm gonna sit down, but I will hang out afterwards.
And there'll be another
there may more.
opportunity for discussion. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Dina Nolan. I'm with Madera Irrigation District. And so this part of the presentation is going to refer to the MID GSA specifically. So the MID GSA is approximately 134,000 acres with approximately 106,000 acres of irrigated ag. The MID GSA follows the boundaries of MID for the most part, with the exception of the city of Madera. 90% of the city of Madera is actually in MID itself. So that has been separated out and has become its own GSA, the city of Madera, and Dave Merchant will be speaking about that a little bit later. And then the other portion of land that is in MID but is not in the MID GSA is lands that are within both Madera Water District and MID. So there is some overlapping lands in this area of the county that are in both MID and Madera Water District. Those lands are now represented by the Madera Water District GSA, and Joe Hopkins will be speaking about that in a little bit. So this presentation applies to all of the lands in MID that are also not within the city of Madera or Madera Water District. And can I just get a raise of hands out there of how many people are in the MID GSA? Good. All right, well, welcome. If you were at our board meeting on Tuesday, this presentation is going to look very familiar. So,
The start of it.
well, for the most part, yeah. So about 99% of MID's ETAW is from irrigated ag, again, in the MID GSA. And I just want to point out to everybody that the numbers we're looking at today are 2015 numbers. So we're sitting here in 2018, the plan is due in 2020. Those numbers obviously have changed already and are going to continue to change. And we're going to talk about that a little bit in this presentation. But again, 2015 numbers, the irrigated ag represents obviously the vast majority in the MID GSA. But I do want to point out there is rural residential, there are disadvantaged communities and such that are part of the MID GSA that we recognize. So here's a very familiar looking chart here. So the MID GSA itself, as of 2015, using 2015 land use data, shows that MID GSA has a current shortfall of about 26,500 acre feet per year. However, if you look at historic MID and the MID GSA, going back 1989 through 2014, which is the time period that the consultants and such have chosen to look at. When we look at that, so 1989 water supplies compared to 1989 land use in the MID GSA each year going forward, it's about 1,800 acre feet per year shortfall. So the MID GSA has historically been operating in very close to sustainable operations for the last 25 plus years. The current shortfall, and again this is 2015 land use data going back through that time period, really is dependent on the crop changes over the years. So 2015 land use cropping patterns and such looks much different than 1989. So we recognize that difference, and this is what MID GSA has chosen to look to close that gap for sustainability.
But I thought Tommy just told us there was 160,000 acre foot overdraft in
Basin-wide.
Sub-basin-wide, yeah.
MID.
Yeah, and so let me just clarify, when Tommy was presenting earlier, he was presenting for the entire Madera sub-basin, not only representing MID. This is only MID. So what is being planned by the MID GSA to close this deficit by 2040? So again, we're looking at the 26,500 acre foot per year number. Well, again, that's 2015 information and data. We are now in 2018, and MID has been working very hard over the last few years with the acknowledgement of SGMA and the situation of our sub-basin to already begin taking steps to complete the closure of that gap. So the district has been investing a lot. It's been looking at projects, it's been looking at programs of how we're going to close that gap, and we've already made significant progress. So between 2015 and 2018, again, these are projects that are already been completed. We've rehabilitated and began utilizing 8 recharge basins throughout our district, which were previously not utilized. We've installed over 12,000 feet of pipeline projects in that time period. We have installed automation at over 54 sites throughout our district. We have annexed the Madera Ranch to MID. MID previously owned the ranch property, but it was not a part of MID. That annexation was complete in this time period. We have established and utilized an on-farm recharge program. Some of you may have participated in that over the last few years. And we've acquired and imported additional surface water supplies. So again, throughout this time period, 2015 and 2018, we've already made significant progress. And it's anticipated that this covers about 10,000 acre feet annually already. So going forward, there's still a deficit. We still acknowledge that. We still understand we need to achieve sustainability by 2040. So we're not done yet. It's still going to be a process, but we've already identified and are looking at projects and programs to close that gap in the relatively near term for our district. So between 2018, as we sit here today, and 2040, we're looking at additional recharge basin acquisition. We are actually currently in the process right now of acquiring a 22-acre recharge facility for the district. We've been working on enhancing and developing partnerships with other agencies and such to develop water supplies. We are enhancing our on-farm recharge program. We're continuing to work with some nonprofits and such to try to bolster that whole program and get more people involved. And we're going to be looking at exploring new fee structures and incentive-based programs for utilizing the surface water when it's available. As far as demand management, so most of the things you'll hear today, it's divided essentially into 2 categories. We either need to increase supplies or we need to reduce demand and do demand management. At this point in time, with information we have available, MID GSA is not anticipating the need for demand management if we can continue to enhance our water supply projects and programs. And again, we think that that is very achievable in this time period. So again, MID GSA is not looking for demand management as we sit here today.
Where is the 22-acre recharge facility going to be at?
It's located right off in the area of Highway 99 and Avenue 9 about.
Question?
Sure.
It sounds like the Madera Irrigation District is doing extremely well. It seems like you're right on top of it and will meet the goals needed. Is it time to let other people in the Madera Irrigation District?
I don't like that either.
So that's a frequent request that the district receives, and as you can see, we are close, but we are not there yet. And I think as you'll hear from some of the other agencies that are yet to present, again, 90% of the city of Madera is in MID, right? We acknowledge that. They've been paying assessments for many, many, many years. Madera Water District, a portion of Madera Water District is in MID GSA. You know, we have cooperating agreements with some of the other agencies and GSAs that are going to be presenting later. So we acknowledge that we are doing very well. We are close, but one, we are not there yet, and two, we have a lot of other partnerships and obligations that we are also working through. So, you know, it might come to a point in time where that is an option, but today the district is not considering that.
Are they considering to make more recharge facilities around the county besides out that one that you just mentioned?
So the district already has and utilizes 8 recharge facilities. We also are establishing partnerships with other GSAs to utilize their recharge facilities and sharing those benefits. Currently in process right now, the 22-acre recharge facility is what we are acquiring, but we will be looking at other options too. Okay, so what might this look like in detail? Again, we've kind of gone through the projects and programs we're looking at. And just to put some numbers to it, again, additional recharge basin acquisition, that includes the 22-acre recharge facility. In process right now, we're developing water supply partnerships, on-farm recharge programs, and again, exploring new fee structures and incentive-based programs. So as a landowner in the MID GSA, how much can I pump? Again, the MID board has decided to take a district-wide approach to management of our GSA, so it's not a parcel by parcel management, it's a district-wide management. And so again, at this point in time, there is not anticipating the need for demand management in the MID GSA. But that is, you know, that is contingent on the fact that we have to be able to continue to enhance our facilities and enhance our water supplies. So what does that mean to you, those of you in the MID GSA? That means that we're going to need to continue to invest in water supplies and projects. As Stephanie alluded to earlier, these things are not cheap, they're not free, there are going to be expenses associated with those things, with those types of projects and programs, but we think we can get there. We're going to need stakeholder participation in programs such as on-farm recharge programs and such. So I think coming out in the next few years, you're going to see where the district's asking landowners to participate in different types of projects and programs. We encourage you, we encourage your neighbors to get involved and have that participation so we can achieve the sustainability without demand management. And we're going to be analyzing current assessments and water pricing structures. Again, looking at incentive-based programs for water supply, for surface water use, and different types of projects and programs. So stay tuned, those types of dialogue will be coming up. We are going to be looking at those. So what else does this mean to me as a stakeholder in the MID GSA? The MID GSA itself is not at this time anticipating the need for water meters. We're not anticipating requiring water meters nor reading water meters. However, there is a county ordinance related to water meters. You still will have to follow the county ordinance, but the MID GSA is not anticipating, again, reading water meters or requiring water meters at this time. But what else does this mean to me as a stakeholder? As Stephanie discussed earlier, you know, we're all in the Madera subbasin, and so we're all going to still feel the impacts of the Madera subbasin. So you can anticipate that the water levels in your wells will continue to drop, just as they have for the last number of years. I mean, you look back on the numbers from 1989 through 2014, the MID GSA was fairly balanced as that area. Yet you all saw the impacts of your wells continuing to drop. You will continue to see that, and so just expect that and know that until the entire subbasin becomes sustainable, you will see those impacts. And that's all I have.
I want to get to the other presentations, but are there any other MID related questions at the moment?
I got one.
Sure.
Is the Lake Madera area being used as recharge?
Yes.
And how often? I mean, a lot or a little or
As
much as
sort of
possible.
in between?
It is utilized, yes, it's in the MID GSA, and it's being utilized to the extent possible for regulation and recharge.
Okay. What about the storm water that's released every year? What are you planning on doing about getting some of that, if you already are, or more, and more storage, and, you know, developing that a lot more than is currently going on?
Right, so any opportunity to divert our surface water rights, we do that. So there's different types of water available to us under our contracts depending on the year type. So that's exactly what we're doing, is creating on-farm recharge programs to spread that water, recharge basins and other activities to try to capture as much of that water as possible. We're looking for ways to increase capacity in our conveyance facilities to move that water faster. When you get a little window, you want to move as much and take as big a gulp as possible. So that's exactly what those list of activities that Dina presented on include and why we're having them.
How much water do you think that they offered you last, not think that you know they offered you last year or year before, what, like, is it approximately that you were offered by the Water Authority, Front Water Authority, and how much did you use, and what do you expect to use in the future?
Well, it's based on our contract limitations. So we have different types of water available to us, and that limit is based on then how fast we can move that water. So the canals are only so big, right? Our pipes are only so big, so we can only divert and consume that water during that window of time that they make it available. So there's at certain year types, obviously lots of water that gets sent down the rivers that is not capturable just due to infrastructure limitations.
Okay.
Any other MID?
I would like to know though, like from the Front Water Authority, how much do they offer, or you know, let go of the limitations just for a minute. How much of that water is available to us in Madera Basin each year, from everybody included, not just MID, because I'm sure you probably know about that.
Well, I don't
a rough
have,
idea.
Yeah, I don't have the summary. I can tell you what our contracts are, and that's what we're allowed to divert, and that allows us access to other waters. But for example, our contracts with the Bureau of Reclamation, Front Water Authority, but from Bryan Dam, we have 85,000 acre feet of Class 1 and 186,000 acre feet of Class 2. And then you're offered other waters on top of that based on what's going on with the reservoir, risk of spill or losses that we may have access. So any year type, it depends. It's a very difficult question to answer because the duration of those availabilities change based on whatever's going on with the reservoir.
Let's move forward now to the next presentation. I wanted to let you all know that this PowerPoint presentation is going to be on the website, so you can review it later as well.
MaderaCountyWater.com.
MaderaCountyWater.com.
Hi, I'm Julia Berry. I'm the General Manager of Root Creek Water District. We are located in the southeast portion of the sub-basin. Many of you may know our district because we're known for having the development in the Rio Mesa area at this time. The Riverstone development is at the northern portion of our district. It takes up a very small part of our district, and the rest of it is currently being farmed. We are adjacent to the San Joaquin River on the south, and we do enjoy a turnout from the Madera Irrigation District's lateral 6.2, and those are the two places where we're able to import surface water to our district. We have a total of 9,300 acres, and like I said, 8,200 acres of that is currently being irrigated for agricultural purposes. So when you do the numbers, our ETAW, our estimated applied water is, our evapotranspiration applied water is 19,000, about 19,000 is for irrigated agriculture. Rural residential is 150 acre feet, and our total is just under 20,000 acre feet. Our consumptive use is 2.39 acre feet to the acre. So we estimate that our shortfall is 5,500 acres in our district. So we also have been working hard to try to find ways to move water into different places in our district. Like I said, we can take water from the San Joaquin River. We have holding contracts down there, and also 2 diversion points on the San Joaquin River. We also have the turnout, as I mentioned, on the lateral 6.2. So we have constructed 5.4 miles of irrigation and conveyance pipelines that come off of the turnout on the 6.2. We use that for irrigation currently. That particular turnout has a capacity, the pipeline has a capacity of 50 CFS. I'm not sure that we've ever used that much. This year we ran about 20 to 22 CFS, and that's about all that we could run in order to irrigate the properties that are connected to the system. We have imported surface supplies in the last couple of years, very small amount in 2014, 502 acre feet. Obviously 2017 was a great year for us to capitalize and take what they call the big gulps. So we took 6,800 acre feet into our system. And in 2018, this year, we brought in 1365. That 1365 is a combination of water that we bought from Madera Irrigation District, and we also have outside contracts that we can call upon. The other thing that we're doing to decrease our demand is, as you know, as houses come into production, we take agricultural land out of production, and thus far we have converted roughly 640 acres from agricultural use to residential development, and that does reduce our consumptive use, and on the next slide I'll show you how much that reduces, or on the next few slides, how that reduces our consumptive use. We also capture stormwater. We have two basins, two facilities that not only do we use recycled treated water from our wastewater treatment plant from the residential development, but we also are able to capture stormwater and recharge that into the ground. And in 2016, we did a Prop 218 election, a Prop 28 and a Prop 26 election, and we established fees to pay for managing the district, but we also adopted two fees. One is a surface water fee. This year, the current rate was $126 per acre feet. So anyone who was able to take surface water on their properties, not only did the district purchase that water, we also were able to charge those growers $126 per acre feet. So we recoup some of those costs that we save to buy water in the next year. We also have a recharge fee that we've established, and this year it was $90. $18 of that recharge fee goes for capital expenses to construct more pipelines, more infrastructure, and the rest of it goes to purchase surface water. So we do have some fees in place. I don't know if there are any other GSAs in the Madera sub-basin that have done Prop 218s, which perhaps MID has, I can't speak to it, but through the SGMA process we were given that authority and we took full advantage of that. I do want to say, I meant to mention before that Root Creek is unique in that last week the board actually voted to start drafting our own groundwater sustainability plan. We are going to continue to participate in the process. That's why we're here today. We're going to continue to meet with other technical experts. We just felt that we wanted to have our own numbers and start writing our own plan, and we may come back together at some point, but we wanted to make sure that with a short amount of time that we covered our bases. That was the direction from our board. So our district engineer is currently working on that. So what are we planning to close the deficit? Well, we are going to increase the use of surface water. So like I said, we have two firm contracts for water. It varies obviously each year on one of our contracts how much we can buy, depending on what water is available. We plan to expand our irrigation distribution system. Right now our irrigation system comes through the northern part of the district, and we would like to continue to be able to deliver water to more irrigated properties to decrease the demand on groundwater. We also plan to construct more recharge projects to import the surface water that we purchase, and also to capture stormwater and maximize our contracts, obviously. We also, through the residential development, are taking the opportunity to take our water and recycle and reuse that on our irrigated lands, our agricultural properties as well. Again, I mentioned we already have district assessments, and this is the first year the Prop 218 was in 2016. This is the first year that the board took action to start charging the surface water and the recharge fees. So in detail, we will be hoping to increase our surface water importations somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 acre feet of water. Again, like I said, the overall consumptive use will go down, reducing demand. So when we look at our average use of agricultural water at you saw the number, which was 2.39 acre feet per acre is what we're using currently for farming. We will be decreasing that as houses come online down to less than 1 acre foot per acre. So it is a savings, and I know that there are some comments about the changing from agriculture to houses, and it may not be a good thing in some people's mind, but in the eyes of SGMA, it's actually saving groundwater. Obviously, stormwater capture I already mentioned, and we have a recycling system to treat the water. So what does this mean for you? Do we have landowners? I think I see 2 landowners in the room from Root Creek. Is there anybody else? Yeah. So what does it mean? It means that we have plans in place where you can continue to use your water beneficially. You can use it for municipal use and agricultural use. And again, kind of the same statement you just heard. If we can continue to maximize our surface water supplies and do our demand reduction by converting ag land into housing, we don't think that we'll have to change the amount of water that you can pump as a farmer in our district. What does this mean? So hopefully you can farm as historically. You have a secure water supply through our contracts. We'll continue to seek more water. And our transition to urban is going to reduce the consumptive use. It will cost you more to farm in our district, because if you want to take surface water, or if you want to if you want to pump groundwater, you'll have to pay the recharge fee, which, as I said, it's $90 this year, and it ratchets. There's a plan for it to ratchet up each year. But we've had public meetings with our landowners, and they're so relieved that all they have to do is pay a recharge fee to pay for surface water, and they can continue to farm. So that's actually been received very positively in our district. And we do want to recognize that groundwater levels in certain areas of our district have come up, but we do recognize that in the sub-basin, groundwater levels will continue to decline, because not everybody has surface water contracts or the ability to build infrastructure quickly in order to move surface water into their area. I think that's it. The only last thing that I wanted to say is that we look forward to, as we write our GSP, and we're going to continue working with the other GSAs, we want to continue to talk about the 0.5 native groundwater number and the fact that that may become a sustainable yield number, as I heard earlier. We at the Root Creek Water District have a position that those lands that are near or adjacent to a waterway where there is seepage and there could be potentially higher groundwater levels could be treated differently than those that are not near waterways. So I just want to make that statement as we move through the process.
Any questions, Root Creek questions?
I have one. How many homes are you supplying surface water to?
Right now we have about, surface water, right now we have about 264 homes online. Is that correct, Brian? But we're not, oh, I'm sorry. The homes are not taking surface water. We take surface water and we use that for irrigation, and so we put it back into the ground, and so we pump groundwater for the homes. But we replace it with surface water.
And that's 200?
Yeah, we're close to 300, yeah. Any other
Question
questions?
over there?
Yes.
Are those fees, and I apologize if you said it, I might have missed
That's
it,
okay.
but the recharge fees and, those are charged to the residential customers in, Root Creek only, or no, is that?
So actually we have 3 fees if you want to get into it. There's the first fee is a land-based assessment, and that is charged based on your particular property size by acreage. And so there's a land-based assessment that they pay.
Property taxes, or is that a one-time fee?
That's correct, it's annually. And so if you're a homeowner, you obviously pay a very small portion of the acre, because we're building about 4.6 homes to the acre. So your fee is very small. The land-based assessment is for everybody, agricultural and municipal. The other 2 charges are only for those who are participating in a water program agriculturally. So if you're taking surface water that we are purchasing and delivering to your property, you pay this year $126 per acre foot to enjoy the benefit of that water. And if you are pumping groundwater, you pay $90 an acre foot to pump each acre foot of water that you pay to the district, which we put into a coffer to not only purchase surface water, but to build infrastructure to get that out to your property at some point.
So are the, so I'm assuming that's farmers, are they metered, or I'm curious how that.
Yeah, actually we did a well canvas this year, and 80% of the wells in our district are metered currently.
Is it self-reporting, or are the numbers automatically?
Yes, so we'll be self-reporting. This is the first year that we're doing it, and so this time we're using extrapolation. So we're looking at crop type, we're looking at what your evapotranspiration is and what we think your use will be. We're sending out estimates with bills, and if you have data that you can show that where you've looked at your meter, well, we do. We looked at the meters in the spring. Take that back, right, Ryan? We looked at the meters in the spring, and we can come out and read meters as well. We're willing to do that. The only thing is, there are a lot of things with meters. Sometimes they're not working correctly. Maybe they were they weren't connected throughout the year, and so we're willing to do it that way. If your meter is in good working condition and you have good information that we can use, absolutely.
Yeah.
We want to be as accurate as possible. Yeah, and this is the first year.
There's a point of clarification.
This is our district engineer, Brian Ehlers.
The residential customers are paying part of the program through their water rate, but they're paying in their water bill.
Yeah. So the storm and sewer and municipal water rates that they pay, the bills that they pay, also go toward this program.
I have one. Riverstone,
Yes.
is it zero balance now, or at what point does it become zero balance in the total build out?
So I'm gonna let Nick answer it, but I'll try. So as part of their conditions of approval from the Board of Supervisors, we are required to recharge into the ground on a rolling average every 5 years, 3,400 acre feet of water. So we purchased, like for example, you saw that we brought in 6,800 acre feet of water last year. So that gives us a pretty good jump toward our rolling average. So yes, we are required to stay in balance. Nick, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, so it's actually on the water, just the Root Creek Water District
over time, as the development proceeds and grows to 2,000 acres, what it was approved for, it's just gonna, the use of water of the development will, or I'm sorry, the use of water in the GFA will continue to go down, just as development occurs. So zero balance is occurring on a water district level, not on a development level.
The residents that drive by there in the ranchos always have the same question. I see that 1,000,000-gallon storage tank that pumped water out of the ground. What are they doing over there? And at what point will they be at zero balance, and does this make sense? So can you give me a rough idea of an answer for, you know, trade-offs, time period, and I know that you're gonna be at zero balance at build out. What about before that? For Riverstone, if you can.
Well, I'm not really sure how to answer that. I mean, it's like I said, it's not the development's responsibility to balance. It's the water district's responsibility, and that's everything that we're talking about right now. The requirement of the water district before Sigma happened was to bring in 3,400 acre feet district-wide on a rolling average, rolling 5-year average. So right now, we've just started that process. You know, like I think Julia's first slide showed the water that we brought in. We brought in 6,800 acre feet in 2017. We brought in 1,400 acre feet in this year. So we're on a rolling average. We're going to try to hit that 3,400 acre feet, which, according to all the entitlement approvals that Riverstone had, was enough to hit that zero balance. Now Sigma changes things a little bit, and that's why we're going through this process. 3,400 acre feet may or may not be the right number, right? I mean, it's going to depend on what we're doing right here.
So
That's the point on the tank. The tank is for fire flow protection, so that's what that tank is there for.
There you go, that's a good answer.
What's that?
I said, that's a good answer. Truthfully.
Thank you.
Question?
Questions? Yes.
So Root Creek is charging or anticipates charging groundwater pumping fees?
Yes.
$90 an acre foot?
Yes, we are
So
doing that
Madera
now.
Irrigation District is not anticipating charging any such fees, is that correct?
We're looking at our profile of fees at the moment. As we mentioned in the slide, there's incentive-based programs that could be considered, but that's all being explored.
But
So we already have land-based charges, assessments that go towards our operations that we've been collecting from our constituents since we started.
But you have a difficulty in incentivizing people within the district sometimes of even using surface water versus pumping groundwater. So how would that be rectified?
That's true, and we're exploring options as we speak. We've also done a lot of outreach to provide information to our growers on why they should take surface water when it's available and shut those wells off. I think that outreach we've seen from just the sheer number of new turnouts that we've been installing and new hookups or turnouts that were there not historically used that are coming online, that education and outreach alone has been very effective.
All right. Gravelly.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Ken Bozo with Quagna, representing Gravelly Ford. The district is located kind of in the southern part of the basin, just adjacent to the San Joaquin River, shown here in red on the slide here. I'm gonna get a show of hands of Bradley Ford growers. A couple, all right, very good. Diane, she's one of our directors also for Bradley Ford. Bradley Ford is about 8,400 acres, and most of it is irrigated. 7,500 acres of the area is irrigated. The district was formed in 1961, so it's been around for many, many years. Before that, it was a private company, and then later they formed into a special district in 1961, and then they obtained a Class 2 contract for 14,000 acre feet. Of the irrigated, or the use of water, all but 100 acre feet goes to agriculture in the district, and the ETAW is about 2.16 acre feet per acre. So those are the estimated numbers at this time. And going from that, we can go on to, you know, it shows our extraction here compared to our recharge. The amount of water, this slide doesn't have some numbers on it.
That's once more.
One more?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Apparently I had animation on yours. I was letting you build it up, Ken. You didn't.
So anyway, we have estimated currently the shortfall at about 1,700 acre feet. You look over the average, you know, Bradley Ford's been bringing in their supplies. They have, the supplies come from, most of it's delivered through the San Joaquin River through a connection to the canal there. MID also delivers a lot of water to the district when they have surplus conveyance capacity or surplus water. We purchase water from them. And then there's also a Cottonwood Creek where there's some a minor water right in that Bradley Ford has also. But we know that in the future, MID is going to be working on their shortfall. So we know that these supplies will disappear that we're purchasing from them now. So we are planning ahead to fix that problem. And we want to increase the surface water delivery to the property, to the district. And to do that, we will, you know, utilize our bureau contract and also construct some recharge projects. There's many areas within the district that will be exceptionally good recharge areas, and we'll be pursuing that as a way to maintain the acreage that we have farmed right now. And the Bradley Ford GSA is not anticipating that there would be any demand reduction required, as long as we can bring on these projects in time to offset the deficit and the water becomes available. We know there's a lot of people scrambling for water, so it's going to be a kind of a probably group-wide effort to secure things. There may be some cooperation with other districts, and we're going to be exploring anything like that that's going to help with the ongoing supply. So as it might look in detail, it's going to be construction of recharge facilities. That will require, you know, conveyance facilities and regular recharge construction. In cooperation with that, we're going to be developing a monitoring program, and this is how we're going to be able to prove one way or another what's happening in the district. There are, you know, some information out there now that's being used for groundwater levels, but much more measuring of levels needs to be done to get a good picture of the what's going on in the groundwater basin. So we'll be developing a monitoring program to do this, and that should show to the state and to the water board that we are doing what we need to do by 2040. We feel that the construction of the recharge facilities won't take too long, and we hope to have them operational so we can offset the deficit in about 10 years. So hopefully we'll be online by then to maintain our levels from there on into the 2040 period.
Question?
Yes?
This recharge thing you're talking about, what exactly is that?
Recharge is, you know, you've probably seen other places of the state. It's just building a bermed up area, can be various sizes, where you have a low earth berm, and then you have a facility that has a canal or pipelines that can get to that area and put the water on the property.
Do you have to pay for that?
Yes. All these facilities will cost money. You know, there will be the cost of the land. Someone's going to have to, either let someone lease their land or have the district buys the land outright. Then the cost of the plumbing to make it work, and that's pretty much how they work.
Well, I got a question. The irrigation district is gonna spend money to recharge, but they can give the money to another grower that's not in the district, and they can irrigate. You get the same effect of recharging just through irrigation. It's just as efficient, but you don't have the expenses of setting up these recharge stations. You could just use an existing farm, which will irrigate with surface water, which will do the same thing, and it doesn't cost you anything. So it seems like you're spending money on something that I don't understand why you wanna do that. Just get a farmer, you can charge the farmer for that water, and you'll get money for it instead of having to pay for it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tom.
The problem with that is like the water won't be available. So typically when excess water is available to you is when it's everywhere. So you need a recharge facility to stick that water. There isn't a crop demand typically when there's flooding event or something like that. There's no crop demand to irrigate.
But there's farmland which is available. I mean, you can still irrigate almonds when they're dormant, and it's not gonna hurt them.
And that's the on-farm recharge programs that MID spoke about that we've been implementing and it's been very effective. But you have to have a combination of those. A lot of times growers aren't gonna be willing to put additional water on land that's already been saturated on a heavy rainfall year. So you need to have a basin or a place to stick that that's not gonna have trees that could blow over or potentially risk damaging them or cause other issues.
Growers are starting to change their minds on that now because they're being forced to be part of these plans if they're not in the irrigation district. And you allow them in, they would certainly take that excess water.
Bradley
regardless of
Ford
what's
has
going on.
used that and accessed that the last few years that has been happening. So some farmers are taking it in January and February, and we've got all this rain. Well, we're flooding, we can get water, we're going to put it out there. So we're doing that. But we're finding.
I was surprised to hear this gentleman said that, which I never thought was possible, that there are members of the district that have never used, you had to open up the valves because they never used them before.
It comes down to dollars. Surface
They're
water.
pumping groundwater instead of
Surface
taking
water's
the
not cheap.
surface.
It used to be upside down, where the surface water cost a lot more money, and so farmers were pumping it, depot pumping it, because they couldn't afford, or they felt like cost effective. It was not cost effective to take the surface water. It's changing now.
Absolutely.
It's changing, it's reversing, it's reverting. So now everybody's scrambling to get the surface water, but it used to be not cost
Right, and
effective.
for those growers that aren't in a district, we're scared. And now we're looking at all these things going on, going, hey, what's going on? You have people in the district that aren't even using it, and we wanna get in and we can't get in.
I'm in the same boat.
Something's gotta change.
Part of it's in and part of it's out, and I'm thankful for Bradley Ford. We're so close to being sustainable, we're trying to find a way to make us sustainable, and we're really close to it. And if that right now, the experts are saying, the tech people are saying, we need to have another ponding basin, we don't have enough to get the water out there and let it percolate down. That's what our goal is, to become sustainable, we're really close. So I'm part of the other district, the white zone like you, and it's like, we're scrambling and trying to figure that one out. Sorry.
Any other gravelly field questions? Did you, how do you finish
Well, I
your
was gonna make a
presentation?
comment.
So-
The recharge basin concept is really a very efficient way to get water into the ground and to get those wet water supplies, those peak times when people can't use the water, you need the space to put it in there. Groundwater recharge is slow, so having enough area to allow it to percolate over a long period of time, if you can regulate it, has been very, very effective in lots of parts of the state, and it is pretty cost effective if you have the means to get the water to these sites. Usually the conveyance costs are the hardest part, but Gravity Ford is already set up for that. They already have a canal off the river, and so they're ideally situated to be able to recharge at a reasonable rate. So short term, they're, in the next 10 years, we'll probably be using a little bit of overdraft while the recharge program gets fully operational. It's one thing about groundwater recharge is we don't know what the cycle's gonna be. You know, often in this industry, we think like 1 in 3 years you'll have a significant amount of water. But that's changing now. There's gonna be everyone out there searching for water in the valley because every basin in this valley is in critical overdraft. So we're not only fighting with, you know, with among ourselves on getting more water on the ground. We have, you know, the outside interests that are also willing to pay for the water, and we'll be competing with them. And then the elimination of overdraft within 10 years in Gravely Ford. So what does this mean to me as a landowner in Gravely Ford? Right now, growers will be able to continue current level of farming. That's one of our top goals. We want to achieve balanced supply in 10 years. And unfortunately, this will mean increased water costs. And what we'll be doing is trying to come up with the most economical program to maintain the levels of Gravely Ford. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Joe Hopkins with Provo and Pritchard, representing Madera Water District. It's a 3,750 acre district off the northeast side of the subbasin. Pardon my voice, I'm getting sick. It's essentially wall to wall. It's pistachios, planted pistachios. Been there for planted that way for 50 years. We've our irrigated agriculture is 100% of our ET for applied waters to agriculture. Those pistachios, our current ET is this 2.43 acre feet per acre. So where we stand now is like a 5,000 acre foot shortfall over the district, which is a mountain to overcome here. We're hoping not to have to do any land fallowing, demand reduction. The goal, I think everybody's goal is to do more surface water. We have access to surface water through pumps on the Dry Creek system, and we're investigating a Madera Lake project. We'll look into banking and water transfers in the future, but a lot of it's we're relying on MID for some of that surface water. At least right now we are, and take it as it's available. But we may have to continue to look in other places. And so, like I said, at this time we don't want to go through any demand reduction. What we think that path looks like is that we have 5,000 acre feet to overcome over this 20-year period. We think the first 5 years we'd like to take care of 10% of that, 500 acre feet. By 2030, take care of the next 1,500 acre feet incrementally. By 2035, another 1,500 acre feet. 2040, the entire 5,000 acre foot shortcoming. To do that, we'd have to continue to use stored groundwater, so continue to see a decline in groundwater levels, and the backstop is reduced demand in the future if those water supplies don't come to fruition for us. So how much can I pump as a landowner in Madera Water District? Landowners don't pump. The district does all the pumping in the Madera Water District. So it's a service of the district, part of their infrastructure. But the district will be limited to this 0.5 acre feet per acre, similar to everyone else. If we can increase our surface water supply, our portion of imported deep, what we're calling it, percolated water, that portion comes up a bit. Just wanted to reiterate that's kind of the 2040 objective. It's not 2020 out the gate that we're going to get to surface water, we'll be seeing this 0.5 acre feet as our supply into the future. So as a landowner, what does that mean? It's continued lowering of groundwater levels over time as we can transition to these stable water levels. Increased reporting requirements, just as part of the monitoring program for Sigma going forward. We do at this time monitor every turnout, every pump with a flow meter and meter that monthly, and an increased cost in water to the grower. So the surface water costs more than groundwater has. So we'll need to accommodate for that. So I went through that kind of fast. Any questions?
I may have missed it, you may have said it. What's the current allocation that you're getting from MID?
It's not an allocation, it's subordinate lands within MID. So it's as available and what the district's willing to purchase at that time.
So under Sigma, if let's say you can't bring in more water, how many acres would you have to fallow in the district?
Haven't done that yet. Well, I mean, our demand's 2.5, 0.5 is available, it's 20%, so 4,000, so only farm 1,000.
So you'd lose about
200 acres, yeah.
About 3,000 acres you'd lose?
Yeah.
So the value lost to the county or to the economy would be in the multi-million dollars, like?
Yeah, likely.
Times.
Any other questions?
Over $50 million.
Way more.
More than that.
Good question. Why don't you add it up for all of them? Even if you're
Any other
150 off, it'll still be a giant number. Make our heads spin. Seriously.
I only got a phone.
Good afternoon, my name is Dave Merchant. I'm the development director with the city of Madera. The city has actually has formed its own GSA. We are adjacent to and encompassed by the MID GSA, and we did talk in concept about perhaps incorporating into a single GSA. There was just enough that we didn't know about what Sigma meant and what the ramifications were that for the time being we are separate, although the city and MID do have a collaboration agreement that dictates, that doesn't dictate, it describes how we will collaborate and work together on various GSA related features. The city is a little bit different as a GSA than what you've heard before for a couple of different reasons. The city is located sort of square in the middle, roughly in the middle of the sub-basin. The little red spot on the left is the city's wastewater treatment plant, which is part of the city limits but not contiguous at present. One interesting thing about the city's GSA is what you're going to see in terms of these numbers and the maps is a snapshot in time. But unlike most of the other GSAs, the city will tend to grow over time. So the city has grown since the 2015 land use scenario that we're looking at. We've also grown since the GSA itself was formed. And so one of the challenges that we'll have to work with is every time the city's GSA grows or the city annexes property, that comes from one of the other GSAs. There's no property in the sub-basin that's not included within a GSA. So as the city grows, some other GSA is going to shrink, and we'll have to figure that out as it goes as to how we measure conformance and compliance over time. One other note here is the total geographic boundary of the city's GSA, at least in this scenario, is just a little over 10,000 acres. The irrigated portion of that is about 15%, roughly about 1,600 acres. Of that 1,600 acres, a part of that is land that's designated for urban development but currently farmed, and part of it is land that's just designated for ag inside the city limits. And most of that area, maybe all of that area, is land that the city owns but leases out as part of its airport, clear zone, clear space area. So this talks about the irrigated lands versus the urban total consumptive use. You can see that the irrigated land where it took up about 15% of the land takes up about 35% of the consumptive use figures, but the bulk of the consumptive use is in the urban use at about 4,600 acre feet with about a total of 7,100 acre feet. If you look at the difference between recharge and groundwater extraction, the numbers show somewhere around 3,300 acre feet. As one of the few folks that is fully into the GSA, GSP process and not an engineer, what I tend to pick up on is if I look around, I can see 3 different ways this has been measured. This is the one that we're going with today. 3,300 acre feet is what we're going to try to demonstrate that we can address. So how can we address that? Well, I think we can really attack it in maybe 3 ways, and if necessary in the longer run, maybe a 4th way. First of all, we have the ability to simply attack it through urban, municipal, and industrial conservation. So we place that number at about 800 acre feet. I think that could already be in hand. I think that number could be larger over time. We also have the ability to reduce ag consumption. I've simply put that number at 1,900 acre feet. But in terms of the city's ability to control irrigation consumptive use on lands that it owns but leases, we have the ability to address that over time if necessary. And the land that is in the city but designated for urban use, we're the city. We want that to be developed for the use that is shown in our long-term plans. In terms of water supply projects, as we've discussed, the city is within the boundary mostly of MID. MID has expressed a willingness and an interest in working with the city on recharge projects in particular, at least as an example of the kind of things that we can work on. So we've run this number past the MID staff. This number, I think, is certainly attainable and could certainly be larger, particularly if we're looking at a 2040 scenario. The last bullet point that I've put here is recycled water. I showed you the wastewater treatment plant as the feature in the initial slide. The city treats about 5 million gallons a day of wastewater at the plant. Currently that's treated and perked in ponds. It is possible, but very expensive, to treat that to a higher standard and reuse it for one feature or another. So the options for what we do with the plant are to continue to do what we've done. We could treat it and sell it to farmers who want the water. That's certainly something we've looked at in the past, haven't quite been able to make that work for everybody. Or we could treat it to the highest standard, put it in a pipe and send it back to the city, either for irrigation at parks and those sorts of things. But even the tide is changing in some areas where the dreaded terminology, toilet to tap, is coming into play. And you treat that water to the highest standard, you mix it with your fresh groundwater, and everybody's happy. That's very expensive. So at present, I don't think we need that, but in terms of the long-term ability of the city to control its groundwater sustainability, that's something that we can do at considerable expense.
Dave, did you say 5 million gallons per day?
That's what we presently treat at the plant.
Treat.
Yeah. The capacity is larger, but in terms of the current flow, that's about it.
Capacity?
Capacity is, permitted capacity is about 7, and the plant is designed at a little over 10, 10.1, I think. So a little more detail as to what it might look like. Well, we've already seen about a 20% or 20+% reduction in overall extraction since 2014. So as opposed to some of the agricultural interests, which are only having to deal with this this idea of using less now, being forced to do that, the city has been under pressure since 2014, really, with state mandates to achieve a certain level of conservation, and so we have been doing that for a number of years already and seen some good results. There's going to be continued emphasis on reducing irrigation use If you live in the city, I know at least some of you live in the city, you probably understand that the bulk of your water usage occurs when you water your lawn. And if you have converted any considerable space in your yard to drought-tolerant landscape, your water usage goes down very dramatically. We'd like to continue to see that done in the city. It just makes sense from a homeowner perspective as well as a total system perspective. We have a system of tiered rates at present. Those are probably going to continue to be in place. Part of the revenues generated from the tiered rates support rebates. So if you want to go in and replace your lawn with drought-tolerant landscape, we have a rebate in place to be able to do that. We're also looking at, again, the potential of converting lag inside the city limits to urban use. That includes reducing consumption on city-owned land over time, as well as maybe sort of the most exciting thing for me is our ability to partner with MID to enhance recharge through the addition of basins and connecting those basins to the MID system. So that's it for the city of Madera. Any questions for the city, the GSA, its water system, how we work? Yes, sir. We have tried to connect basins to MID facilities, but the ability to extract directly from the river, we don't have that ability, and I'm not going to suggest that it's something that we're able to get or likely to get in the foreseeable future. MID's canals are a different deal, but pulling water from a riparian way is, I'm not saying it's impossible, because some of the folks that are dealing with new development in the county are able to do it, but since we don't have a water right, our ability to do it is probably not good.
And we did just finish a connection with the city of Madera, a basin they already had existing, so MID did the connection there with, in cooperation with the city, so we are looking for those opportunities and are currently doing that.
Any other questions for the city?
I have a question. Would that water be flood water, or would that be purchased water from MID?
The question is, what water would that be? And the answer is, we don't know just yet. I think there are, as I think Tommy probably described, there are lots of types of water. They get their water through different mechanisms. I think there are a couple of opportunities, whether that's just 215 water or whether in a more interesting way. I don't know if I should talk about your possibility of using M&I, but there are some long-term possibilities that we have, and our relationship of being inside MID's boundaries really facilitates our ability to make that partnership work. Last call? Thank you. Who's next?
Will today's PowerPoints be available online?
Yes.
Yes, as soon as I get the final version, it is a PDF, I'll post it. Great job.
That was I knew it, but it's like running the machine.
I understand, it's fine. So these are the preliminary overdraft estimates, and we say preliminary because they will be modified over time. You should expect them to change a bit, so don't be wed to those numbers. Historic of around 118,000 acre feet per year, and current of 161,000 acre feet per year. You've seen the overdraft volumes vary greatly by GSA, from very little to a very large number. I didn't say this originally, it's probably worth saying the SGMA put the county in charge of all areas that didn't have a GSA. So the county essentially became the GSA for folks without one, which is why we're slightly behind, but working on it. And the solutions vary by GSA as well. So the best way for you to be engaged in the process isn't necessarily the large sub-basin meetings, it's probably attending the next GSA meeting for your GSA. So we've listed all of these here. I think everybody has one in November. The county GSA is now meeting the first Tuesday at the Board of Supervisors at the end of that. So generally sometime between 10 and noon. The November meeting was canceled, unfortunately, so our meeting isn't until December. But the website for the sub-basin is at the bottom as well. Yes, ma'am.
Does the sub-basin website have time and locations for all those meetings?
We're gonna put all those on the sub-basin website. We do have everything up there with the link. I don't know that all the next dates are there. And I think Malka, it's your turn for discussion.
Yeah, and we're in the process of putting together a longer schedule of, so that you can see the upcoming GSA meetings as well as the ones that are just in the next round. And we will make that available and put that on the website. I want to reiterate what Stephanie said, is that the decision-making bodies for this process are the GSAs. And so those of you who are interested in participating in a decision-making process should definitely look at the GSA schedule and plan to participate if you can. I want today is an opportunity to engage with the technical experts. And so I want to continue that. I'm not exactly sure how to do that. There are a lot of people in the room and a lot of technical experts. So I'm going to just start. Did you have a
question?
You have a question, Ann?
There's one presentation missing. Would we see that at any point for Newstone?
Yeah, they're in the back.
We're just here to coordinate and observe to see what's happening in the other districts. We're going to have eventually work out a coordination agreement with them. I wasn't invited to give a presentation here today, so I don't know if we can make one in the future.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask people to raise their hand if they have questions, and those who can answer them should step up and answer. And I think that follow-up questions are fine. If it turns out to be too long of a conversation, I may ask you to take your conversation offline and let someone else speak. But I think follow-up questions are fine. Who wants to start? Raise your hand high. Actually, can we turn on the lights? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, it was really helpful to get kind of an overview. I think what's pretty clear is that the first first 5 of that list are basically got manageable challenges ahead of them and kind of a path forward that isn't necessarily all that disruptive. But the county GSA folks are in a completely different spot. And there needs to be way more public engagement, way more opportunities for input. If you look at the county's website, the August meeting was canceled, the September meeting was canceled, probably for very good reasons. But you know, a Board of Supervisors meeting is the only next meeting on the list. For November and December, technical meetings are canceled on the website. So, you know, we've got to have a way to access this process to try to figure out what's going on and how to help.
Malka, could I respond? I really hear your need for input, so I want to make sure that you saw some things on the website. So there is, if you would let, the county has an advisory committee made up of some of the folks in this room that meet quarterly for the Madera Sub-Basin GSA, for the Chowchilla Sub-Basin GSA, and for the Delta Mendota. Next Wednesday, the 24th, we do have a combined Madera and Delta Mendota meeting. So that's open to the public. It's at 6 o'clock in room 2005. That's up on the website. We did cancel meetings. Absolutely. We canceled some of the group meetings for the Madera Sub-Basin, and there were a couple of reasons for that. The first and foremost one was that we were presenting stuff from David's Engineering so quickly that the technical experts didn't have time to digest it and to process it. And that puts us in a pretty uncomfortable position for our stakeholders, right? Now the information's public, but we don't completely understand it. So we did take a break from those, but all of the GSAs have continued to meet.
And I have to say, meeting weekly
Yeah.
on the technical side to try to wrap our minds around these numbers and make sure that we were all comfortable with them and that it was meaningful information to provide the public that we had confidence in. So there's been a lot going on, and I think there's going to be a lot more outreach on the county side, not to speak for you, but there is opportunities there coming up.
If I can just follow up, then can we expect soon kind of a list of, you know, a schedule with some meetings, particularly for the county GSA folks? I mean,
So the county GSA now meets the first Tuesday of every single month except that they canceled the November one.
Is that in conjunction with the board of supervisors meeting?
Yes. So the Board of Supervisors convenes, and 9 o'clock is closed session, 10 o'clock is regular session, and at the end of regular session, they will reconvene as 3 separate GSAs, Madera, Chowchilla, and then Delta Mendota. So that's a new thing. It took a while for me to get that process up and running, but it is up and running, and we met in October. There's a meeting recorded online too.
So are those meetings on the website, the county GSA meetings?
The meetings are on the Madera County website, which is different than Madera County Water.
Do you have an approximate time? You said the Board of Supervisors, after the Board of Supervisors?
So the way the meeting.
Open session, I got all that.
Right, so the meeting starts at 10, so I would just go to the 10 o'clock meeting. There'll be some other items on there, but, you know, this is the world of public meetings. We've all heard things we didn't want to hear.
Just
We
trying to
just
get a
wait.
time grasp.
So go to the 10 o'clock meeting, or you can watch the meetings live on your computer from home too. Lots of people do.
Just last comment on this, just with all due respect, and I do mean it with the utmost of respect, it's a very difficult process, very difficult I appreciate the difficulty for the staff and the professionals. I do. So this is said in absolute respect. But those Board of Supervisor meetings, when they're covering 3 GSAs, first of all, it's a very intimidating thing. They're sitting on a dais, and you don't really feel like you have access. There's not really an opportunity. Secondly, they gotta cover 3 very distinct GSAs. They cannot, that is not the place for serious interaction with stakeholders who really have their entire livelihoods at stake. This is massive, and it's a massive problem for the county GSA people. There's no clear path forward for them, and there needs to be a much more focused, small meeting. I mean, if we gotta go talk to these, you know, people door to door in some cases, or, you know, you got the Farm Bureau, I'm with the Milk Producers Council, you got other third parties that are willing to help, that have some relationships with farmers, but there needs to be now that you've kind of got the baseline understanding of what the problem is, there needs to be a much more focused effort particularly in the county GSA in Madera, to go talk to folks and get input.
Well, it's the residential too. Has there been any collaboration with SimQ?
We have spoken to their representatives. I mean, I think.
I think this is pretty ground level, is what it feels like, as far as the task that our particular GSA is undertaking. I live in the ranchos as well, and so, it's very scary to listen to these numbers and look at, really what we're potentially facing. I mean, I'm concerned as a homeowner, but I'm also concerned as a business person as well, because there's, I've got potential liability for any business I do in that area, which is scary. But more importantly, I don't think that, I think there's a lot of people in the ranches alone, which obviously some people that live in the ranches are also farmers, but we've got 2 distinct groups, farmers for agriculture and homeowners, and I just really feel that, I think there would be a lot of support to try to figure out how to move forward, and I think, like I said, you were dumped a huge task on you. So, I mean, you know, I don't know if we need to enlist other people to try to really start getting the word out there or what to do, but I think that there's a lot of people that would absolutely be ready to jump in to try to figure this problem out, because we're looking at not even considering agricultural wells, but like I'm on a community well. There's 28 of us. We're one of the last ones in the ranchos on community wells. We own our own water company out there, but you know, our well, we could be looking at having to re-drill that in the next couple of years, and it would just be assessed among everybody, but that's huge. And you know, a lot of people have had to do it on their own. So anyway, I'm just saying that I think there's a lot of people who would have a lot of support if we can somehow figure out how to get the word out and get people to start collaborating.
It would be great if people could come to the advisory committee too, because we're discussing that and it's more of a small group atmosphere and we can toss ideas around in a more informal way.
Is that the October 24th meeting?
Yes, next Wednesday.
But that's a group of 3 GSAs?
No, it's just the Madera Sub-Basin County GSA Advisory Committee plus the Delta Mendota. There's only 3 people on the Delta Mendota. So we're really looking at like 12 folks in a room. It's probably a good way to give input to the county.
So what is that? Where is that?
So October 24th at the county government headquarters in room 2005 at 6 p.m.
That's on the water website.
It is.
Yes.
It's on the water website?
Yes.
Madera County Water.
I mean, I realize I'm jumping in late, sorry, it's just kind of, but.
You serve in the new?
I'm concerned about the public thing as well, but is there any plans in the future or to consider making presentations to students in regard to this significant problem, like high school seniors?
So Madera Irrigation District has been doing a huge outreach effort. We've been doing, and just in general, water in the community, and such, and we've been doing from elementary all the way through high school. So our board's been very supportive of public outreach in all forms and fashions, and so we have been doing that. So if you know of anybody who'd like the presentation, we'd be happy to go out and get it. Now that's related to MIT, but it's just a general overview of water, so.
Including college students.
Including.
Okay, so I'm here both as we grow and we also live in the ranchos. We're here for an entirely different concern. We have learned of an illegal water operation that really was going on in our backyard. That involved a local well driller that was filling up water tanks and taking them out of our residential area. This involves more than one company in the well drilling business that's doing this. We have proof, we have videos, pictures, every angles of the trucks that you need from all of the different neighbors that are surrounding this property. We have met with the county, Stephanie or GSA, on this. We have several concerns because, one, there wasn't a meter, as there should have been one installed. We caught that in July of 2017. The homeowner, for some reason, wasn't cited for that. And according to our ordinance, chapter 13.101 of the installation of water flow meters, it says that, it's really clear that it says, I'm sorry?
I'm asking others.
Oh, okay. It says that, that there's a list of violations, misdemeanors, and, you know, on every, I guess, time that this is, every day that they don't have a meter. If we date back, I mean, the well completion happened in January 2017, and we caught them in, July of, 17. And that was all happening, this is well over a year, that these water trucks have been leaving, the property. as many as 8 in a day, and we're 3,000 gallon trucks of water. This has affected a number of us, and a number of us have had come close to losing our homes. 30,000 to 60 to drill a new well, lower a pump. We don't have a pump saver. We've had, things burn up. There's just been a number of concerns. Like I said, we met with the county on October 1st, and I just wanted to ask Stephanie if we have went back and have we verified, and I know that you admitted that we dropped the ball there at that property, and I completely agree, but have we verified the hookup on that property, and has the county made an effort to physically read the meter, not count on the honest homeowner there to send that in. But have we done that? We also talked about educating the citizens in what to look for when these trucks, this is a violation in our residential area. How are we educating the citizens in what to look for and where to report when these things are happening? Has the county met on that? And also, are these?
Yeah, I'm gonna stop you right now. It's a little off topic. Would it be better to have this conversation offline?
Well, I just want to know where to.
Yeah,
I think that's a part of our issue, which he's touching on, is the county residents really don't have anywhere to go. And we have a lot of issues to discuss and to resolve. And so if you can tell me where, on October 1st, I was told to come here.
Well, I think, this is me, and I'm really sorry I'm going to miss it. I'm on my way, which is wrong. That was a random call. So Monica, some of that's code enforcement, and I need to follow up with them, and I have and have not heard back, but I don't know the answer to that or have access to the system that logs it. But in terms of referring you here, it seemed like a lot of the issues that you were talking about were relating to wells affecting other wells, which is absolutely the business of GSAs, and that's a lot of what we're hearing here is concerns about particularly domestic wells going dry. So that was why I suggested this meeting.
Well, we're on private, and it's just, this last Sunday, I don't know if you all came across the Madera PD website, but there was a Jeffrey Spriggans that was taken into custody for filling up a 450-gallon tank from a fire hydrant. And how is that any different from this homeowner doing it over a span of a year? And we have that evidence, and he wasn't cited for not only not having a meter, but running this operation for over a year. And we've given the county that proof. And there's been zero citation. I was told Matt Schreiber was the person that made that call, not code enforcement.
So Matt Schreiber is in charge of code enforcement.
Right, but it was over. So that's that on both times. So I have no idea what's going on.
I will ask Matt to call you because I can't answer your questions.
Okay, and about that map, about the water flow and that, and he still
you guys
has.
talk about this offline.
That sounds wise.
So did you have a question?
You get action.
Anybody else? Let us know here.
I have one.
Go ahead.
We get fired.
Who's first?
How much has DWR grant funding helped out the sub-base and get the GSPs out in order?
DWR grant.
Can't hear you.
Question about how much
DWR
grant funding?
Anybody want to
So the county, the county does not have the contract yet. So the county is fronting the money to pay for the GSP development. But there is a total of $5 million. It's split $2.5 million for the Madera subbasin, $2.5 for the Chowchilla subbasin, of the 2.5, 1.5 is GSP development and 1 million is for monitoring wells in severely disadvantaged communities. Do you follow that?
Yeah.
And we received $500,000 originally.
That's right, and then there was an additional stressed basins grant, which is also Prop 1, that was $500,000.
I have a question for our hydrologists, our esteemed hydrologists. We've seen the estimates and pretty close facts to what the demand is throughout the entire basin. Nobody's talking about how much water we got. Every time I ask this question, I get this, well, okay, we'll get back to you. We need some kind of an estimate of what our aquifer, upper and lower, has in it, and we'll take it as an estimate. But right now, we're projecting on doing all these facts over the next 20 to 25 years. At some point, we need to know how much time we got. At this, just this, estimated, no legal rigmaroles, no commitments of hanging for the answers, but how, it's like a bank account. We have a water bank account. We have a bank account. You can't keep taking money out of your bank account when you don't know how much you got in it.
So we do have a sense of how much water there is, and Nick actually shared the DWR document with me and that I passed on that has estimates, and they don't have anything more recent than whatever.
I find that hard to believe. Maybe does the Department of Water Resources have, or what is it, the federal government has some really good stuff too. And you guys know more about this than we do, and this is a simple question.
Yeah, there are estimates out there. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but what I can tell you is that the requirements of Sigma are that by 2040 you're no longer that you are stable. So essentially, past that point, you can't continue to see chronic groundwater level declines.
I understand that.
So
how does that answer the question?
I don't know the exact numbers. I think I have the numbers. I just don't have them with me. But of some estimates, and it's based on a number of different a range of values for what the storage capacity of the materials is in the subsurface. But there are, if the Bulletin 118, DWR Bulletin 118 provides some general numbers for what those volumes of water look like in the subbasin.
That bulletin's over 10 or 15 years old.
That is it, and we have seen groundwater levels decline, but that's that's as a general sense one number to look at. And then again, I'll provide those. I think Stephanie, we can, if you want,
I think Greg remembers. Greg.
How about it, Greg?
Yeah.
Come on, Greg.
Sorry, I'll stand up to make it easier. So the question is kind of twofold. I think first of all, there's a certain amount of water that's under our feet, and we've been depleting that, but there's still a fair amount left. How much more can we keep depleting until it's completely gone? That it depends on where you are and where bedrock is. If your bedrock is with your quality, it might be 500 feet somewhere. It was kind of a number. Other places they can take it down to 1,000+ feet. If they wanted to drill that deep, and there's as Nick was just saying, there's an amount of water in that soil. But we're really kind of getting to the point of we're going to continue to use some of that until we get to a stable point. We've estimated right now the precip on average and the storm flow on average gives us about a half an acre foot across that whole 380,000 acres of a basin. That's how much is there to be able to continue to use over time once we've stabilized. Now we may continue to mine the groundwater a little bit more, and we've made some rough estimates like, well, if you, the LSE guys have done this, roughly what happens if you took off another, if you dropped the elevations by another 20 or 30 feet, how much does that kind of volume create? Magnitude-wise, it's maybe somewhere in the 5 million acre foot range, that we could maybe mine. If you remember the county's number, we said about 90,000 acre feet a year for part of the transition. So if we were to just take it rounded to 100,000 acre feet, 10 years at 100,000 acre feet just for the county part is 1 million acre feet, right? So we're gonna keep dropping levels, but it's about how much we want to allow it to drop. If you want to let it go 70, 80 feet lower, which is gonna have different issues in different places, I don't think, first of all, that's feasible everywhere. And secondly, that's not what Sigma is trying to get to. So if we take the 1/2 acre foot as a native groundwater starting point, and then you start bringing in everything. Tommy was saying MID's got contracts. Every year that the federal government makes those available, they want to take advantage of them as best they can. But the federal government doesn't make them available. What was 2015 allocation?
Big zero.
Big zero. 85,000 acre feet of contract, zero. Okay, so that means we got to make up, right, in other years. You try and get your 186,000 class 2 contract. You don't get all that all the time. It only comes in windows. So we have a big challenge. How much is in the soil to keep mining? You know, there's millions of acre feet, but that's not really something we should be saying, oh yeah, we want to go after this. We got to put some sort of limits, and this is the idea of these undesirable results. We're supposed to establish minimum thresholds that say, okay, out in the ranchos, we're going to, try and keep groundwater levels from doing this. Out here, we're going to try and keep them in this range. Over here, we can maybe be more flexible or less flexible. Those are the things we have to try and talk about in the next 4 to 6 months and get into the plan. And there's a big groundwater model that's getting developed. It's almost ready. It'll let us test some of that. Okay? So, your question is a little challenging because there's one thing to just say, hey, how much water's in the ground, but that's not water we're ever going to want to try and pull out.
That's true.
So
we don't want to pull it out, but can we approach that question? You don't have to answer it.
Well, that's what I just said. 5 or so million gets us 20, 30 foot of average elevation drop of groundwater levels, roughly.
Depending on where you are.
Depending on where you are. Now, in some places that's going to be more, in some places that's going to be less, depending on where the various recharge sources are and what's happening. So, 5 million acre feet is a lot of groundwater to be pulling back out, but it also has implications. That's going to mean some people's wells are going to continue to drop, cost of pumping, everything. So we got to find the right balance.
I want to take one more question because you've been patiently waiting, and then I'm going to adjourn the formal part of the meeting. But people are going to stay, so I want to continue the conversation.
Well, I'm still a little confused. Sorry, and it kind of goes on with what you said. I heard a lot of the irrigation districts saying that at the end of the day, their people could just keep doing what they've been doing. But I thought I heard the county say that they were going to have to put some restrictions. So if you've got a guy that's right on the border and are you telling me that if I'm in Mid and my neighbor across the street is in the county, that this guy's going to get restricted and this guy's going to have no restrictions?
Very possible,
Does that
yeah.
seem right when it's one great big basin? The state several years ago made everybody but the farming industry conserve. We had to cut, I think in the ranches, we cut back almost 35–40% on our water use. I don't understand why everybody in the basin shouldn't have to conserve. I don't care if it's 1% or 50%, but it seems like it ought to be. It's one big basin. Shouldn't we all have to conserve, period? And then you continue to try to do this stuff, but to keep saying business as usual that I have seen is more and more unirrigated land being planted year after year after year, drought year after drought year after drought year. Just 3 years ago, 200 or 300 acres, 2 blocks from me was planted. It had never been irrigated before that. In the middle of a drought. When are we going to say that, I'm sorry, but enough is enough? Farming's got to be more efficient somehow, I guess. And the rest of us have to continue.
So I hear what you're saying, and I just want to put out a couple of terms that I think are problematic, that aren't what you're implying at all. I understand what you're saying. New land going into production that's never consumed water. I think we got to think about it as consumption. If I'm just more efficient and I pull less out of the ground to irrigate the trees are still using the same amount. The landscape is still using the same amount. But some of it, if I'm over applying, it's going back down. So that's kind of a recirculating system. So when you talk about being more conservative and more efficient, it doesn't necessarily solve our problem. We still have consumption. So I'm always saying that because a lot of this stuff was talking about ETAW for a reason. It's consumption, it's the water that's going to the atmosphere. We have certain areas that have been, long-standing entities, some sort of geophysical boundary or geopolitical boundary that's had a contract, and their landowners have been paying for that water to come in over time and over time. And some people have chosen not to.
And I get surface water being purchased, but groundwater being pumped to me is a whole different. If I were God,
Right.
you wouldn't be able to pump groundwater for any use but
So-
residential.
So if you were to say,
I'm serious, you know?
Is that what God intended?
hang on.
I don't think God intended that.
Hold on. We're not gonna play the I'll move out when you move out game. Trust me, I've been there in those meetings. They're not fun. We all have to solve this together, and it is a challenge, and it is hard. And if you're in a water district with contracts for surface water, you're in a lot better position. It's gonna take a lot more opportunity to take advantage of the water when it shows up, which we haven't been doing in this basin. But if you're in the county white space, that the county essentially got handed this job and said, you get everybody that's left, the county doesn't have contracts and surface water supplies, and it hasn't been investing for decades in infrastructure and contracts. And there's not a lot of new places to go out and buy water, and there's a limit of about a half an acre foot roughly. Maybe it's greater, but it's not gonna be much greater than one, even if you said that, that's available natively for all the lands out there. So if you're in, don't have access to something else, it's a challenge. And that's what we're trying to solve. We're trying to figure out how to do it in an equitable way with transition, but there's gonna be implications.
Thank you.
And so I know that doesn't answer your question really, but I understand what you're saying, and the county is looking at ways to try and say, look, there is a lot of land that's that has swapped, and Stephanie was talking about that.
A lot.
There was, in that number, I'm pointing to a white screen. If you remember the county's number, 180,000 acres roughly in the entirety, and 85,000 of that is irrigated. The rest is in the sub-basin, has access to groundwater, but it's not currently irrigated. You've said in the last few years, and that was 2015 numbers, so in the last few years some changes are occurring. That has to be, we're looking at that. Those are issues that we have to realize and recognize and figure it out, and there's a lot of challenges. And
Development too, there have been so many houses built around.
Yeah, but it doesn't use as much water. I don't care about the development, even though I don't want it, but it just needs to be, we shouldn't be using more water than there is, period. You shouldn't overuse your resource no matter what.
I know, and we're in this position where we are, and the state basically said, you guys we're gonna give you the opportunity to solve it yourself, and if you don't solve it yourself, we're gonna come in and solve it for you. And I don't think anybody in this basin wants the state to come in and solve it for us. So we have to try and solve this ourselves. Some are in better spots than others, and that's just the way it is.
Thank you. On that note, we're going to adjourn the formal part of the meeting. I want to thank all the presenters today, and thank you in advance for sticking around a little bit in case people want to engage you in conversation. And I also encourage you to watch the Madera Water website, but we'll also send out an announcement to the interested parties list when it is updated, so that you can, so that you'll know not only when the next round of meetings are, but when the round after that and the round after that will be. Okay, thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much.
Yes. I am.
Yes, January 2020. You will have one. Yes.
I appreciate you being patient with us. I know you're a little anxious.